Okay, thanks. So I will go ahead now, and you can allow people to still keep joining in. And if there are questions, or if we have to, if there are any things that needs to be repeated, I will do that in due course. So thank you, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me today for the webinar on conscious parenting during challenging times. And the focus today will be to understand the nature and the development of our children and their minds. So just to give, because I'm aware that some of you are connecting to me through Zoom, and some of you are watching me on Facebook. So there are two simultaneous platforms that we are using today evening. For the ones who are connecting through Zoom, may I request you keep yourself on mute while we are going through the webinar. And you're absolutely free to ask any questions anytime by just putting in the question in the chat box. So I will on and off look at the chat box and see if there are any questions that are on a particular part of this webinar, and I will try my best to answer them then and there. If not, I do have time at the end of the webinar to take in all your questions. Now, for the ones who are watching me on Facebook, I am not able to see your comments immediately. But that doesn't mean that you don't ask. Please go ahead and put your comments, ask any questions that you have on the content today. And once the webinar is over, I will go back onto Facebook and I will try to respond to your queries from there. So welcome once again. My name is Arpita, and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, a family constellation therapist, a regression therapist, and a corporate wellness facilitator. I work at Illuminations. I do even my private practice at Illuminations. I'm also a teacher of clinical hypnotherapy. And what brings me here today is a topic that is extremely close to my heart. And that's because my journey in wellness actually started after I became a parent. So what I call as the first innings of my career has been in a completely different field. I studied economics. I'm an MBA, and I worked in the corporate sector close to 15 years. And then life happened. I had my children, and that was a completely life-changing experience for me. As much as I thought that I was completely prepared to bring this new phase on, but we only look at that in retrospect and we think of, I wish I knew that then. And since then, this has been one of the topics that's so close to my heart, because I wish, before we became parents, if we had this knowledge, or even when the children are small, at any phase in life, the knowledge of mind science is so empowering, not only from a point of view of how we overcome our day-to-day challenges. It's about stress, it's about anxiety, but more so in terms even for parenting. And that I discovered very early on as a student of mind science, and that's what has remained as my very, very close to my heart to share with people I work with across the globe, and of course now bringing it as a webinar to you all. So I believe in this quote, which happens to be one of my favorite as far as parenting is concerned, and it goes as, while we try to teach our children all about life, because that's what we think is what we do when we are young parents. But in reality, our children are the ones who teach us what life is all about. And with that as a background, with that as a setup, what I wish to run you through today is this, as you see on the slide right now. So we will begin with understanding and setting the foundation of what do we understand by when we say holistic parenting, what do we understand when we say conscious parenting. Now, from that background, we will go into understanding, because today's webinar is utilizing the science of the mind, understanding the development of the human mind, which is from not only from the birth, but probably from our prenatal experiences that we take in. We're going to be talking a little bit about the conscious, the subconscious, the critical mind, the three parts of the mind, the development of these parts, and at what time of our lives do they develop, the interplay that they have, how do they communicate or how do they affect each other, and the roles of it. Then we will go dive into understanding how belief systems are formed, especially we are talking about children today, and conditioning for young children, because as they grow up and with each age group, there is a different set of elements that they pick up. And I'm going to go through them so that it depends on if you are a parent, and if that is something that interests you, you may also have a pen and paper with you to note down which are the age groups and what you may later would like to focus on depending on the age group of your children. We will then get into, as I said, the stages of development, because with each stage, a different element comes into focus as children grow from age 0 to, actually you can have that for the rest of their lives as well. And it applies equally to us as parents as well. And then a bit about parenting with this perspective of understanding how the mind is formed. We'll get into understanding, and I'll leave you with certain tools and tips for parenting during this time. We are facing a pandemic at a global level, and life has changed drastically for all of us in many ways. And for example, the children maybe are still studying from home. The concept of work-life balance is completely different as of today. The social interaction that children of various ages that we are used to is probably not happening in that level. And all of these changes are makes it a bit more challenging if we don't think through how we are going to, get through this phase, because it may take even a few more months for us to, come back, if we ever come back to the old normal. But parenting during the challenging times, parenting during this new normal, as we say. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of time at the end for any of you to, if you have any questions, I will be answering them. I'll stay back to answer that. And as I said, I will be checking the chat box once in a while to just see if there are any comments that come through. If at any slide, if at anything that I'm talking about, if there's more interest, if there's something that you want to know more about, then please, of course, put in a comment or a question in the chat, and I will cater to it as soon as possible. Okay, so as I said, what I had in mind was to bring this to you today from the angle of an holistic approach, which means we are not today talking just about the physical growth of a child. We are just not talking about the development of the brain. To the contrary, we are going to be looking at first any human being, forget a child or a parent. We're going to be looking at our lives in terms of what we call as holistic. This comes from a Greek word which means to be whole. So the focus is not on just our physical bodies. The focus is just not on our mind, and the focus is just not on the energy that we have within ourselves. We are going to look at it from a perspective of all of these put together. That is what makes us human. Just to give you an example, it's like, it's like having the laptop in front of me through which I'm connecting to you. So the laptop definitely has a body. So I'm able to touch, I'm able to press the keys to move the presentation and connect to you. So the body of the laptop is like our physical body, which has a tangible existence. It can be touched, it can be felt. If anything goes wrong with it, we know we have to take it to the repair shop and get it sorted. Now, when we talk of energy, my laptop can only power through if I am connected to the energy source. So the plug point and the wires that are connecting to my laptop is bringing that source of energy or electricity into my laptop. But we are not able to physically touch it in that raw form. Neither we are able to look at it like visually. But we know that there is either battery power or there is electricity power that is powering the device. And then With that, we also have just the hardware of the computer, and just the power supply is not good enough for me to connect to you, which means I need something else. I need softwares on my computer, which I'm using. For example, I'm using Zoom, I'm using Microsoft PowerPoint, and maybe a couple of others. Now, these softwares, if we just put them together and say it's a software, that software is what we call as the mind. Again, that mind is that intangible part. It is not something that we can touch and feel, but we absolutely cannot connect or cannot live without one of these three elements. So from that perspective, we are my focus will be to bring parenting from this angle of the body, of the mind, and the energy. Now, from there, if you chunk it down, I'm first going to be talking about the development of the human mind, which brings us to the beginning or the introduction to the science of the mind. So that's an interesting question. Like, then the first thing that comes to our mind is, then what is mind? And I would give it a few seconds. If anybody wants to share, that's also fine. About what is mind, in the sense, we talk about mind very much throughout the day. We say, have you lost your mind? Or I don't know where my mind is today. So this is not a new word for any of us, but what does it mean? And when I ask this, whether in my trainings, whether in my classes, or in webinars as well, the most prominent answer that I mostly hear is, oh, mind is the brain. But mind is not brain. There is a basic difference between the two things, mind and brain. And because there is difference, hence we have two words. Otherwise, we would just use one word and go with it. So when we talk of the mind, as I said just a bit earlier, that mind is the intangible software. Brain, compared to that, is the hardware. Why? Again, because my physical body is tangible and brain is part of my physical body. However, mind is also there, but I am utilizing my mind to live my life, but it doesn't have, it's not tangible. So to understand it very, very simply, the hardware is the body together with the brain in it, and the software is the mind. When the software works on the mind, then the body functions, and then we are alive. So even if you look at the Oxford Dictionary definition of mind, it says it's an element of a person that enables them to be aware of the world. You see, even in this definition, we are talking about it's an element. It is not a tangible asset or an organ or a part of our bodies that we can put our fingers on. And what do we do with this element? With this element, we are experiencing life. We are aware of the world, their experiences. It gives us the capacity to think, to feel. For some people, they'll say it's a faculty of consciousness and thought. So all of that put together, what we are trying to say here is that intangible asset, that intelligence with which you are living life, is your mind. Mind for everyone is the same. It is not different. However, how we use this mind and how the mind develops is what we are going to focus on today. Now, in the holistic sciences, we have a very peculiar and a very interesting definition of mind. We say that mind is a vibrating ball of energy all around us, the center of which is at the pit of our stomach. Now, it's very interesting because when we say it's intangible, it's a ball of energy in which I am sitting, I'm soaked in it, and the center of which is at the pit of my stomach. Now, if you think about it, what is at the pit of our stomach? What is there is our organs, our gastrointestinal tract, and what we say as the pit of the stomach is what in other words we say is our gut. And hence we have this term gut feeling. Now, my gut or your gut doesn't feel anything. Neither are there butterflies in any of our stomachs when we feel that rumbling feeling. Which means that, what do we mean by gut feeling? Gut feeling is that beyond my subjective experience or beyond my cognitive knowledge, I have a feeling about a person or a thing or something. So the epicenter of mind is at the gut. There are many schools which say that gut is one part of the hardware through which the mind is functioning. Some schools say it's there is the heart plays a similar role, and of course the brain as well. But today the focus is not on the hardware. Our focus is on the software, which is mind, which is a powerful tool, and which is the software. So getting to the basics of it, because this in itself is a science on its own, and it could be one full day workshop if we are just working on understanding the mind. Just to give you a very sneak peek into the science of the mind, and I will relate that because today's topic is about parenting. So how this mind develops, and as parents, are there certain things, if we are mindful of it in terms of the development of the mind, that will help us navigate through this beautiful journey of parenthood in a more beautiful way. So as I said, if this is the ball of energy all around us, the center of which is at the pit of the stomach. So if you imagine that is that sphere, which we call as mind. Now, of course, we all understand that mind has two parts. There's a conscious part and there's a subconscious part. As you see in the diagram, it looks like an iceberg, which means only a little bit. If you look at an iceberg in an ocean, what we see with our eyes is only the top part. And it is approximately, for an iceberg, they say it's 1/10 of the total size of the iceberg, which means there's a huge part of the iceberg that is under the ocean. Of course, if we take a deep dive, we will be able to see it, but from the surface of it, we don't. It is the same with our minds. The conscious part of the mind, the part of the mind that you and I are now using, and using for what? We are using it to think, to derive logic, to analyze, to feel, to judge, to do our decision making. All of that happens in the conscious mind. Now, this mind only starts to develop once a baby is born. And if you see the fun part of it, it is only roughly around 10%. Many schools say it is way less than even 10%. So only that part of the mind is what we are using throughout our lives for anything and everything that we do. Which means there's a bigger part of the mind, which is the subconscious mind, which is approximately 9 times bigger in size, because if you see the ratio, it's 10% and 90%. What does this part of the mind do? And this is the part of the mind which probably is picking up imprints, and I'm going to come to that, even before we are born as babies. So this part of the mind, which is huge, if you see, has just two very, very simple functions. Function number 1 is survival. How and why? So for example, if I tell you that, can you raise your right hand and wave at me? I'm pretty sure each one of you can do that, because we don't know which one is right in my hand and I can wave at you. But that I am doing very consciously, which means the voluntary movements of our body, which if you think about it is actually very less, is controlled by the conscious mind. But the involuntary movement, for example, the ease with which I'm waving my hand, then with that same ease, I should be able to control the rate at which my liver is functioning. But I cannot do that, because conscious mind has no control over internal body or organ functions. Who controls that is the subconscious mind. Hence, the fact that we are alive, which means the fact that my heart is beating and my breathing is going normal and my liver is functioning and my kidney is functioning, is because this is governed like as in autopilot by the subconscious mind. It keeps us alive. So when subconscious mind is not there, we are saying that we are not alive. But when conscious mind is not there, we are still alive. Like for example, when we go to sleep at night, conscious mind goes to sleep, but we are still alive. All our internal body functions keep happening. Second function is it stores. And when I say it stores every moment of your life. Imagine in files. So this part of the mind is actually what we call as the storehouse, or it's like the hard drive of your computer. What do you do with the hard drive? You're just storing files. Your all your archived files are there. The same thing is done by the subconscious mind. Subconscious mind has no sense of judgment. So right from the time that we are in our mother's womb and the imprints we get in the womb, from there to this present moment, just imagine all your memories are filed and archived. And that is your subconscious mind. Now, the strength of the minds, not only there's a difference in size, but as you see, the strength of the subconscious is way bigger than the conscious mind. So 1x to 6,000 times x. And then coming to the more interesting part now, so even the subconscious mind, which starts to develop when we are in our mother's womb, has two parts. One is modern memory. So modern memory is all my memories that is relevant to me and my life. From the time I've had a consciousness, whether it's conscious, subconscious, I am making a reservoir of those memories. Similarly, there's another part of the subconscious mind, what we call as primitive memory. Now, primitive memory is very interesting. It is like what we call as the genetics, the DNA, or ancestral memory, memory that has come down to us through evolution, through many, many generations. Now, coming to this part of our discussion today from our parents' perspective, it is very interesting to know that many a times how we have been conditioned, we carry that forward. And why? Because that conditioning, that inputs that are coming consciously or unconsciously is getting stored in our subconscious reservoir. So before getting into details about children, I will mention the third part of the mind, because this is probably the most critical one in terms of parenting as far as very, very young children are concerned. So there is a third part of the mind, and this part of the mind develops between the ages 0 and 8. And this is what we call as critical mind. In very simple words, here we are talking about belief systems. In the first 8 years of our life, imagine this software called mind is just being programmed. And beyond 8 years, all we do is we are going to run the program that we have created in our mind in the first 8 years. Hence, you will find in every part of the world, in every culture, in every religion, wherever we come from, there's something very common. We say that be very careful how you talk to your child or what you say in front of the child, because children are like sponges. They're going to absorb. In the lingo of mind sciences, this is what we say as this is the time when a person's, a child's critical filter, critical mind, or their belief systems are developed. How are they developed? They are developed based on 4 factors, as you can see on the screen, what I've named here as the SEER. The first one is socio, which means it's the interaction the child has with the immediate family, the extended family, the people around. So it's the society at large and the family in a smaller perspective that affects the development of belief systems. The second one, which is the first E, is education. So it is the education that the child receives. It is the education maybe that the child doesn't receive. So the impact and the imprint of education also plays a very important part in the development of this mind. And the second E is economic, which is what we call as the financial situation in which the child has been brought up in the family. So it could be a lack of resources or it could be abundant in resources, but depending on the child's experience, that also shapes the child's critical mind. And then the last is the religious background from where child is coming. All of this put together in the first 8 years of our lives as children and our children, we develop our mind, we develop the do's and don'ts. So critical filter is all about duality. It's all about the rules and the do's and don'ts of life. Hence, it is very, very critical for parents to understand the significance of the first 8 years of the child's life. Now, for parents who have children who are more than 8 years old, it doesn't mean that all is lost and all damage is done. No, there are a lot of good belief systems which children pick up from the environment and from us as well. But the thing is, and even for us, like none of us are 8 years old, and that doesn't mean that it's all over, the game is over for us. It's not. There are many ways to rewire belief systems that are not giving us any value anymore. And there are so many modalities. Today I'm not going to get into those details. Like, for example, I'm just going to name a few. For example, hypnotherapy or metaphor therapy or play therapy, depending on the age of our children. If there are issues, there are many ways to work on it. I'm just going to check if there are any questions. No. If you have any questions, I'm aware some people have joined a little later, so you could just type in the chat box and I will respond to it as I go forward. So that brings us to the third part of what I would want to bring to you, and that is about stages of development. So overall, when we are talking about the development of the mind, we are of course focused on predominantly and very importantly on the first 8 years of our children's life. However, that is just one way of looking at it, and one way of seeing how you could modulate your communication or neutralize any impact that is coming from the outside, so that the belief systems that are being formed here are in the best interest of the child. Now, from there going forward, and I've picked up something, and the slide you will easily find on the internet, and you can, and I will advise you to please research more depending on the age group that your child is in. But as you see, this is an extremely useful model to look at not only children, but also us as adults, as parents, to understand which phase of life we are in and what are the important elements of that phase of life. I'm going to start with absolutely the first level, which is ages between 0 and 2. Now, if you have children in that age, what is very critical and what they pick up at that age is mostly trust or mistrust. So it is the environment, it is about safety, it is about where, if I can literally trust my environment, how am I going to understand, view, and experience life? So many a times when I work as a therapist and I'm working with people, often if there are trust issues, we often find that there could have been some imprints from this stage of life where, you know, the trust mistrust dynamics may have been a little skewed. This is when, you know, even child is crawling or child is trying to stand up. Now this is about, again, trusting, like am I able to stand up? If I fall, then what happens? And if I fall and get hurt, then what happens? What is the reaction of the environment? It's all about testing the environment with respect to specifically first safety, and then broadening it up into how much I can trust and how much I need to be careful. The second stage is between ages 2 and 3. And as you see, most of the time what happens here is child is growing up now a little bit more. So there's more autonomy. There is more sense of independence. And that's what we generally call as the terrible twos, because this is a very big, the world is a very big, you know, like a lab, a science lab where I can experiment. So again, this inputs that come in at this phase of a child's life can actually instill more confidence, more autonomy, more independence, or it could be just the reverse of, you know, I'm ashamed and I'm always in doubt of myself. Unconsciously, at this stage, these children are really still very, very small. So it's None of this could be consciously even remembered, but these imprints, as we showed in the slide before, that the files that you saw, they can just be there, this copy pasted there, and can be triggered many times later in life. Now going on to the next level is age group between 4 and 5, fairly independent now, starting to get. So this is the time you'll see a lot of children will either take a lot of initiative, so they are like confident in making things happen, or if they fail, if the environment or the imprints from the environment is such, there's always say a negative kind of an imprint, then children may develop a sense of guilt. So it's either I will fearlessly try to take initiative, or do I feel guilty about not doing things rightly or not able to do it. Then we take a jump into, as you see, a broader age group between 6 and 11. Now 6 and 11 is also your primary school going into secondary school, which means there is much more impact of the outer world on the child's life. And this is, so as schooling starts, it's more about whether the child is industrious, whether the child works hard, is happy about his performance, or is there any sense of inferiority, any sense of low esteem, self-esteem that may kick in at this time. And then comes adolescence. As you see, from that time onwards, puberty hits and adolescence age kicks in, which is the foundation of identity versus confusion. Because here also the body is changing, there are hormones at play. Who am I? Why am I like this? And am I happy with what I am? Or is there a state of confusion? Now, from there on, this is for people who have children, what we say as young adults, but it could also reflect your own self if you are a young parent. So the next phase would get into understanding of intimacy and isolation. So am I okay with intimacy? Am I looking forward to companionship? Or is it that I prefer to be by my own and closeness is not my cup of tea? And then going into middle age, adulthood, where we have more of, am I flourishing or am I stagnating? It is your typical 40s, 50s, and then getting into late adulthood. Now, I'm not getting into the details of that because that's more of a reflection for parents. My focus has been more on the other side, which is from age 0 to say adolescent age. And these are the elements that you may want to keep in mind, that you may want to reflect later, depending on the age group of wherever your children more or less fit in. So with this knowledge, with this understanding, now as you see, we have done, I'll just recap, we've looked at 3 things. We have looked at us being whole, which means whatever is happening in my body has a connection to my energy, and my energy has a connection to my mind. We went into understanding of the basics of the mind, which means we are hugely focused on the subconscious part, because consciously we understand and we are interacting and we solve all our problems. But if there are imprints, if there are, imagine in the diagram that I showed to you previously, if the files are corrupted there, that's when we say we have an issue and we want to work around it. So, and this mind for parents, you will know that this imprints start from the time the child is conceived and growing in a womb, and then when they are born, of course. The conscious mind only kicks in at birth and grows from there on. And most fascinating and most importantly, the first few years of their lives are as good as you're sitting and you're programming your mind. So all these small children are actually picking up imprints from the socio-economic, education and religious inputs that they have around them and forming their belief systems. And these are the belief systems when they grow up. These are the glasses they're going to wear, and they're going to look at the world with the colored glasses. So this is choosing the colors, and this is preparing those glasses through which they will look at life. And then, of course, breaking it down more for our children from age 0 to, say, adolescence age. That's what we touched upon last, about what are the elements that we are looking at, what we as parents should be more mindful of. And then that brings me to, with that understanding, to the last part of what I had in mind today, is to focus on parenting during this era of COVID-19, this era of pandemic, where so many things have changed for us as individuals and as families, and parenting has taken a new turn altogether. So from my experience, from the people that I work with the children that I work with, I have a few pointers. I have actually 5 pointers to bring to you today, which has helped not only my clients, I would also say that I use it for myself. I have 7-year-old twins at home. So I can vouch that I have used all of these tips that I'm sharing with you today at home, and I think we have kind of made good use of the lockdown and the ongoing pandemic. So tip number 1 is transparency and honesty. Children understand. They are small, but that doesn't mean they are any less intelligent. Even for children who are just beginning to speak, research says that they have close to 15,000 words in their vocabulary. They may not be able to say it to you, but they do understand, and it's a good policy not to underestimate their intelligence. So what works beautifully for conscious parenting during this difficult time? Number 1 for me is transparency and honesty. Address your child's questions and fears on COVID. Now, I know at least in the beginning, this was really difficult because we as adults, we had our own fears, our own questions, and a sense of not knowing where this is going. But I have found it extremely helpful to talk to them and to address, not to give all information, maybe it's too much for them to absorb, but to tell them that this is a global pandemic. For example, the fact that none of us have gone through it. It is your child's first experience, and it is your first experience as well. And showing that part of you, that we don't know it all, but we do have skills to navigate through this, is extremely important. So not hiding facts, being transparent about the crisis, being honest about it, balanced view, of course, not to give so much information that becomes overwhelming for them, but to be very, very open about what is happening and how does governments work on this, how does medical fraternity works on it. That completely builds trust. If you go back to the slide we had earlier, it builds trust. It helps them take initiative. So this is based on the round charts that you saw. All those elements, it builds in, that intensity to do hard work, all based on the fact that we are navigating, and that's the best, in my opinion, that you can bring to your child, given the uncertainty of the world at the moment. The second thing that works extremely well, again, all tried and tested with me, my friends, my clients, is to set a routine. Because there's one thing that has gone for a toss is we have been jolted out of our daily chores. The way we used to function, the way we would go out, children would go out to school. Even if they're in school now, it's a completely different routine. And it's a good idea to bring back a routine even if there is none. Because the structure to the day gives sanity for not only us, but children thrive on it. It's almost like security. It's almost like giving it a boundary, a healthy boundary in which I'm going to operate. So yeah, many a times you may not be able to stick to a very strict routine, but having an overall idea gives immense sense of safety, security, and safety and security for children, I would say. And then be present. I think this is one of my favorite lines, because this is just you can't express the value of this in words. This is what we say as giving quality time versus giving quantity time. And we have overcome that era when we say we give quality time or I'm always present. By presence, I don't mean that. By presence, I mean This is challenging time, and even if it is not challenging, this is one rule that applies and gives huge benefits. Presence means just being with your child, just being. Mindful presence. You could do it even for 10 minutes or you could do for 30 minutes, which means at that time the gadgets are away, which includes even not only their iPads, but my phone as well. It means if they're drawing, then I'm participating in that. If they're playing, then I'm participating in that. And if they're doing nothing, then I'm participating in that nothingness. It is just being present. It's a huge amount of signal to the child in terms of how much the child is loved, how much important that child is to you, and the relationship. This will work in two ways. It is just not for your child, it is equally for you. It's also a cut off from other distractions where you are just together in that energy with your child. Now, if you have more than one child, I have seen it's very helpful if you do this time of being present together, and you can also try it separately. So you could do it together, and then maybe alternate days you could have that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes, that 1 hour, whatever your schedule permits, to be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually present with the child. It is no action is required. It is just about being in that space of the child, and you will see how remarkably they open up, they share, and how remarkably settled and peaceful you will feel after it. The fourth one is take time out, take a break. Very, very important, because there are so many things we are juggling, we are balancing, and we are like hamsters on wheels, because there's so much to get done in a day, there's so much to get done in a week, there's so much to get done in a month, and this continues. So sometimes just taking time out, in fact, scheduling this in your structure, which I said as point number 2, makes a huge difference. Which means, again, this could be your own time, and also teaching children to have their me time, which sounds a little weird, but when I am not watching television, and when I'm not in school, when I'm not reading a book, what else can I do? And this is the start of probably for children, at least, new hobbies. This is a chance for the child to come up and even talk to you, or just learn the art of being without doing anything. And again, you could start with a 2-minute timer of 2-minute break. I do that frequently. My children are still studying from home. So whenever they have a break is what we call as the stretch break, which means they either have to get up and stretch, or they just have to take one round of the house and come back. And that in itself is teaching them how to breathe, how to decompress. At the same time, it is the same for you, because we project and children take from us. So if there is anxiety that is building up, if there is frustration that is building up in us, and we are not taking our timeouts, our breaks, it will spill over on our children. And then last but not the least is hope. Is teaching children and teaching ourselves first how to look forward. There are many ways to do this. During the lockdown, what I personally did with both my twins, so we had like this, we took out printouts of gratitude journals, and we pinned it up on the wall, and each day we would write one thing that I am grateful for. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do the same. All I'm saying is find your own way of bringing in hope and optimism. So if I have been very grateful for in the past that I could go back and play in the park, which I can't do during a lockdown, brings me hope that things will get better, and I'm going to get back to that. So find your own little exercises, own little way of believing in hope, believing in optimism, and that we have the skills, we have the motivation to go through this period. Children will look up to you. They look at you and they will copy you, they will mirror you, they will mimic you. So all of these tips that are for children are equally for each one of us. because we cannot, if we don't practice what we preach, it's not going to make a difference. So I think that is what I had roughly in mind to bring to you today. I didn't want to bombard you with more because there is already a lot of information. So I will now open up for any questions that you may have. And you could either raise your hand or type in the chat box, unmute yourself, and I'm more than happy if you have any specific question or an area that you'd like to be addressed about conscious parenting. Okay, so I have a question about how do you deal with anger issues in teenagers? It's actually very fascinating that you ask this question, because as a practicing therapist, I have seen a rise in exactly what you're saying about anger issues in teenagers, or any age group for that matter. Now, if you look at teenage, I'm going to just go back. You're looking at probably adolescents. Now, this I have seen again in my experience is a lot to do about identity, or if there is a confusion. So I will answer it from two sides. One, on a very generic side of identity and confusion, and then go into the other aspect of anger management. So see, anger or anything that you see as a parent most of the time is the symptom. You know, it's like the rash on my hand, which I can put cream tonight and go to sleep, but it'll again reappear tomorrow. So how I would look at it and work with it is to understand where the anger is coming from. Anger is only the outward thing, and anger, to the extent I have seen, even getting violent or getting like physically violent, verbally violent. Now there is a reason. Children, you know, the beauty with children is they show, they do not camouflage. Like with adults, maybe because we have more defense mechanisms at work, we are sometimes able to cover it. So I would suggest the first step would be to understand where anger is coming from. Anger may come from sadness. So there are two kind of emotions that we are talking of here. One, which is very short-lived, you know, which is what we call as the primary emotion, is when it's intense in nature, but it is short-lived. So for example, something happens and I react to that and then I let it go. That's a primary emotion. Say, for example, I've lost a family member and I'm very sad about it and I grieve and I get over. That sadness is primary emotion. But I've lost a family member 20 years back and I'm still angry about it is a completely different issue. That's what we call as a secondary emotion. So in that case, first thing what we need to find out if this anger has happened because of an incident recently, or is it showing up as the way, as an outlet of something which is deeper. Now, I'm going to answer that also in terms of the recent happenings with social isolation, with certain restrictions that we are still facing just to keep us safe. Nothing wrong about the restrictions, but they are restrictions. Children are unable to find a way to express themselves. Now, for a child, anger could be a way of venting it out. That is mostly what I have seen in the recent few months. It could also be a cry for attention. So number two would be to look for if there is something that the child is not probably able to speak out or express, and it's coming out in form of an anger. So if that answers your question, look at these two things. Try to look at if it's generated through a episode that is leading to anger, or is this a build-up? If this is a build-up, then look at what could be the non-expressed, like there's something that has not been able to come out in a proper channel is coming out in form of an anger. I'll come back to it if I have not answered your question, just let me know. Then I have another question is, how do you deal with a child 8-year-old having nightmares? What is the best approach? Nightmares or any dreams, even for us as adults, there is this whole line of work, Sarah, where we can analyze the dreams, and we can segregate the dreams in terms of whether this is a dream which is coming out of what's happening in my life at the moment, day to day. Is it because of something that I'm processing and I am kind of metaphorically putting it forward in a dream or nightmare, or are there things that I'm venting out? Now, nightmares in children, from my experience, I'm talking, is mostly of unprocessed. Sometimes, if it could come from some kind of fear. So I have seen mostly it's during this lockdown period, because of very high use of gadgets. And again, this is no judgment against anyone, but sometimes the use of gadgets or has gone up. And I'm talking of live cases where I've seen that they would have come across a game or a picture or something that has scared them, and then it starts to come up in kind of nightmare. What is the best approach? How we work through this is we work through play therapy, or we work through counseling. There are many ways to work through it. With children, we work with puppets. We could work with drawing. So even a simple crayon drawing for children would be able to give more information on it. And it is actually very, very easy to get through it. I have worked on a couple of children, like really young children with nightmares. It didn't take more than 2 sessions to work through it. So look at, and if you want to do it yourself at home, in terms of a storytelling, in terms of a drawing, try to get more information on the nightmares, or if there's a character or what the child is seeing. And that can then build up into understanding. I cannot answer it, in one particular way, because it depends. I would definitely need more information on what the nightmare is about and then go about it. But the best approach, if you want to do it yourself at home, would be to get more information, to check where this could come from. It could come from almost anywhere in the world. It is just not, the gadget is one example. I have a case that I've worked with very recently, that's the reason that popped up. The best approach is always to talk, always to be transparent, and the last 5 tips that I said, there is hope, and gather information and explain this is nothing that is abnormal. We all have bad dreams, and dreams is a way of actually venting out what is there in our subconscious. But you can't explain that to the child, so you might want to take out more information in terms of storytelling. Can you suggest any practical things we can do for these children? You mean, Firak, you mean with the anger? Practical things would definitely see, because you're talking of adolescent children, teenagers. So being very transparent, talking through and helping them understand the underlying emotion. Anger is just on the outside. There could be many things. So it is actually very refreshing and extremely intriguing for the children to also understand why they behave in a certain way. And the other thing you want to look out for is when the children are angry, what I've mostly seen is the outburst comes and later comes the guilt. So this lock has to be broken between I'm getting extremely angry and then I'm extremely guilty about my behavior. So if you again want to approach this at home, then definitely talk to your children. Check in the family if anybody else has something similar, like somebody who has any anger management issues. Explain to them it's not bad. None of the emotions are bad. We label the emotions. So for children, don't label it. Don't say anger is bad. Just explain that anger is a way of expression, which means I can also express myself without anger. And there could be many ways to do it. It could be through writing. It could be through drawing. Also see if there is enough physical activity for the children, because right now what's happening is we are still quite cooped up, and that release of energy is not happening. So see if you can, like as you're asking for practical steps, is there a way to physically exert the children? Can they go out to play a sport? This is what I could suggest with little information. Of course, it will need more understanding. I will leave my number. You can find me in Illuminations. You can always ask me. Maybe on a one-on-one, I could guide you better. if that suits you. Okay, my 11-year-old has always been a hyperactive child, is now stuck in the house with gadgets, has become violent and demotivated and does not even want to communicate. Can you suggest? I would say Kamini, I would say the same. Find a way of outlet of that energy. And yes, if a child is hyperactive, which means, they need that release. So if they are stuck with gadgets, we have to somewhere limit that time. Now, limiting that time, I don't mean by disciplining, because, sometimes it can just have a very counter effect on it. What I would suggest is have a gadget timeout for everyone, or have gadget time which is like in the structure of the day. So for example, you may say that 8 o'clock onwards at night, or 7 o'clock onwards, or 6 o'clock onwards, time out for gadgets, which will mean for you as well and for your other family members that I'm not going to touch my phone, as much as the urge you may feel. So see in your day-to-day routine what is the best way to have boundaries, to have certain house rules, that okay, you are allowed to do your PS4 between 5 and 6, and thereafter this is what we have. The other way I have found extremely useful is music. And different children may react to different kinds of music. I have used it personally for my boy as well, and I let him choose his music, and it has somehow calmed him down, and that affinity to run towards gadgets has gone down. There are also, if you're talking of gadgets, like for example, if you have a Nintendo Switch or a PS4, there are a lot of games that could be even physical. So even if there is no opportunity to go out, if there is opportunity to go out and play, nothing substitutes it. If it doesn't, there are like, lot of games where you could dance, where you could move. So physical activity, because it is extremely important, not only for them, but for all of us. And keep talking, keep communicating that this is something new. As much as you are struggling, we are also struggling. We are also, everything is changing every day, and we will get through it. Nothing beats transparent communication. What else could I suggest? Practical steps. I'm saying this generally, not only for your case, also for, the lady who asked about anger management. Try to develop a habit of reading. And when I say reading, not audio books and not on the internet. I mean physical books. It actually has a very different impact on mind, on sleep, on general well-being. So if you're able to move from the online stuff into physical reading of books, that also I have found, as a mother, as a therapist, both I found it extremely helpful. Okay. Firak says, how do we break this lock? Well, there are therapeutic approaches I could talk about, Firak, but maybe not in this webinar. But yeah, that is what the science is about, of breaking this lock. As I said, if you need, you can always get in touch. It's not necessary that you always have to book a session. At Illuminations, we do 30-minute free consultations. I would be able to give you more time dedicatedly for an issue. You could book it even online just book for a free consult, and I may be able to guide you through it. The lock breaking is the work that I do as a therapist. That is a skill, like, from what I've studied, what I practice, is to break that lock and break the child, make the child become, break free of that lock. That is the whole science about. Thank you if you found it helpful. Thanks, Kamayani. Thank you. I think I've looked at all the questions in the chat box. If there's anything else, please let me know. I'm, of course, here to answer that. Sure, I'm going to just put up the details here. I have a slide, and you could contact Illuminations, JLT, and you could just ask for me, and they will connect me to you. something else on the chat. I'm going to look at that. Thank you. I'm very glad you liked the session. Okay, so here are my details, and Illuminations is there as well in the group. So I'm pretty sure they will send you more details. They will send you my details by email as well. You could anytime get in touch. And if there are no more questions, then I will take your leave. I thank you for being with me here today. I hope you had a good time and have a good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ferak. I'm glad you liked it. You too have a good evening. Bye.